More than simply rendering valuable Vedic literatures, Srila Prabhupada had come to the West, starting in New York, to establish a way of life based on that Vedic literature. Consequently, he had gained first-hand experience in bringing the most materialistic persons to the standard of renunciation and devotional service. His books therefore reflected these practical realizations, and many times in his purports he would relate his difficulties and triumphs in trying to introduce spiritual principles within materialistic society. In the sixth canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he had presented the story of Daksha's cursing Narada Muni. After Narada had instructed Daksha's sons in pure Krishna consciousness, the jealous father, considering Narada his enemy, had cursed him to be always travelling without any home. In his commentaries, Srila Prabhupada had written that he also had been cursed by the parents of his disciples. Therefore, despite having many centres around the world, he had to constantly travel and preach. And in the seventh canto, while commenting on the demon Hiranyakashipu's harassment of his son Prahlad, Srila Prabhupada related the difficulties of the ISKCON devotees in distributing books amid the harassment of Hiranyakashipu's modern counterparts. Thus, Prabhupada was imbuing his literature with the thoughtfulness of his own personality, that of a pure devotee faithfully dedicating his body, mind, and words in the service of the Bhagavatam. As the word Bhagavat refers not only to narrations about the Supreme Lord, but also the Lord's devotee, Srila Prabhupada was himself Bhagavat, and through his books one could gain the inspiration of service to both the book and the person Bhagavat. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 5, Chapter 10, Text 22, chapter entitled Maharaj Rahugana meets Jad Bharat. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Stali Agni Tapat Payaso Abhitapas Stalyagni Tapat Payaso Bhitapas Tat Tapatas Tandula Garbha Ranti Tatapatas Tandula Garbaranti.
Tatapatas Tandula Garbaranti.
Dehendriya. Asvashaya. Sannikarshat. Dehendriya Sayat Sannikarshat.
Dehendriya Svashaya Sannikarshat. Tat
Samsriti Purusha Asyanurodat Tat Samsriti Purusha Asyanurodat
Tat Samsriti Purusha Asyanurodat
Yagni Tapat Payaso Bitapas
Tapat Payaso Bitapas
Tatapatas Tandula Garbaranti.
Tatapatas Tandula Garbaranti.
Dehendriyas Vasaya Sannikarshat.
Dehendriyas Vasaya Sannikarshat.
Tat Samsriti Purushasya Nurodat.
Tat Samsriti Purushasya Nurodat.
Talyagni Tapat Payaso Bitapas.
Talyagni Tapat Payaso Bitapas.
Tatapatas Tandula Garbaranti.
Tatapatas Tandula Garbaranti.
Dehendriyas Vasaya Sannikarshat.
Dehendriyas Vasaya Sannikarshat.
Tat Samsriti Purushasya Nurodat.
Tat Samsriti Purushasya Nurodat.
Stalyagni Tapat Payaso Bitapas.
Talyagni Tapatas
Tatapatas Tandula Garbaranti.
Tatapatas Tandula Garbaranti.
Dehendriyas Svashaya Sannikarshat.
Dehendriyas Svashaya Sannikarshat.
Tat Samsriti Purushasya Nurodat.
Tat Samsriti Purushasya Nurodat. Talyagni Tapat Payaso Bitapas. Tatapatastandula garbarandi Dehendriya svashaya sanikarshat Tat samsriti purushasyanurodat Talyamitapatpayasobhitapas Tatapatastandula garbarandi Dehendriya svashaya sanikarshat Tat samsriti purushasyanurodat.
Is that more simple than Russian?
No, actually it's not Russian. Similar, but
Okay, it's very good. Stali on the cooking pot.
On the cooking pot,
Agnitapat
Agnitapat,
because of the heat of fire.
because of the heat of fire,
Ayasa,
Ayasa,
the milk put into the pot.
the milk put into the pot,
Abhitapa
Abhitapa
becomes hot.
becomes hot,
Tattapata
Tattapata,
because of the milk's becoming hot.
because of the milk becoming hot,
Tandula branti,
Tandula garbarandi,
the center of the rice within the milk becomes cooked.
the center of the rice within the milk becomes cooked.
Deha indriya asvashaya,
Deha indriya asvashaya,
the bodily senses.
the bodily senses,
Sanikarshat,
Sanikarshat,
from having connections with.
from having connections with
Tatsamsriti,
Tamsasriti,
the experience of fatigue and other miseries.
the experience of fatigue and other miseries.
Purushasya,
Purushasya,
of the soul.
the soul.
Anurodat,
Anurodat,
from compliance due to being grossly attached to the body, senses and mind.
from compliance due to being grossly attached to the body, senses and mind.
Translation purport by Srila Prabhupada. King Rahugana continued, My dear sir, you have said that designations like bodily fatness and thinness are not characteristics of the soul. That is incorrect, because designations like pain and pleasure are certainly felt by the soul. You may put a pot of milk and rice within fire, and the milk and rice are automatically heated one after the other. Similarly, due to bodily pains and pleasures, the senses, mind and soul are affected. The soul cannot be completely detached from this conditioning. This argument put forward by Maharaj Rupana is correct from the practical point of view, but it arises from an attachment to the bodily conception. It can be said that a person sitting in his car is certainly different from his car, but if there is damage to the car, the owner of the car, being overly attached to the car, feels pain. Actually, the damage done to the car has nothing to do with the car's proprietor, but because the proprietor has identified himself with the interest of the car, he feels pleasure and pain connected with it. This conditional state can be avoided if attachment is withdrawn from the car. Then the proprietor would not feel pleasure or pain if the car is damaged or whatever. Similarly, the soul has nothing to do with the body and the senses, but due to ignorance, he identifies himself with the body and he feels pleasure and pain due to bodily pleasure and pain. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Dvaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta. Hare Krishna 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 Hare Hare, Hare Rama Rama Hare Hare. So, Maharaj Vrinda, he's expressing his point of view on what Jagbarat has spoken, and so Jagbarat was saying how the soul isn't affected by, has a different identity, its own identity. It's nothing to do with the body. And King Rahugan is saying, well, we're in the body, the body is fat, is thin, experiences pleasure and pain, so therefore the soul within the body also feels this. So Prabhupada's saying, in one sense this is true, but it's an argument that comes from someone who's attached to the body, that misidentifies with the body. So, being the king, he has his desires, he has responsibilities, a strong enjoying spirit, and Ishwar Bhav, that he has this pride in being able to protect the innocent or surrendered souls, or for a righteous cause. And this we hear earlier, this was actually Jagbarat's weakness before becoming a deer and becoming Jagbarat in this present life that's described now. Because being a king, according to tradition, he left his kingdom, his family, subjects, the kingdom, everything, and just lived the life of a renunciant, with no possessions at all, hardly just that which would facilitate his spiritual development, which he'd devoted his rest of his life to. But seeing a helpless deer, it brought out his protective nature. So he took care of the deer, but he became attached. So he got his priorities of his spiritual advancement, and instead developed his relationship with the deer. So it's taken some time. He'd already come to a high level of Krishna consciousness, and seeing his mistake, even in the form of a deer, he left his deer family and so on, and went to be amongst the sages with whom he was before, but took more of the association. It's because he didn't take such association that he fell so heavily into this into affection for an animal. So now he's a self-realized soul, but then King Rahugana, he's still in the body of conception of life, and he can't artificially come to the stage of where Jagbarat is at just now. As a self-realized soul, he was completely absorbed in his identity as a spiritual being, in relationship with an intimate relationship with Krishna, his divine source. So King Vrinda, he's surrendering to Jat Bharat for knowledge. So now he's presenting his viewpoints to see how Jat Bharat would elevate him from that conception of life. But King Hurugana, he's saying that he's stating what he considers as factual, like the bodily fatness and thinness are not characteristics of the soul. It's incorrect, because pain and pleasure is there, and this is felt by the soul, and so there can't be any separation from the soul from the body. One has to take up this bodily conception. So, but this is just from his point of view. He's not, there's a saying, Atmavan Manyate Jagat, that one only sees according to one sees what one sees oneself, one considers the fact. So there's different ways of perception. There's pratyaksha, which is what we can see with our mind and senses, and there's anman, which is with the senses, and there's anman, which is mental speculation. We speculate what's fact, what we see, or what we see. And there's Shabda Brahman, which is perception coming from a higher source, descending knowledge coming from the spiritual world. Pratyaksha is ascending knowledge that arises from the senses. So examples of this are like people say that there's no God just because they haven't seen. They say no one's seen God, but they haven't asked everybody, have you seen God? It's like a experiment that you can't perform. Like they say, life comes from life. There's no life on other planets, even though they haven't been there, and they don't consider that they don't have the eyes to see. But there's the example of we have to accept some kind of authority. To know the facts. So, for example, when we're born, we don't know. We're not conscious. We're born ignorant, so we don't know who our father is. Like if we spend most time with the mother. So the only way we can know who our father is by asking about our mother. It's not that we can go around and asking everyone, "Are you my father? Are you my father?" So we have to accept some form of authority of our knowledge as a source of our knowledge. So in this way, Shabda Brahman is accepted by devotees as this absolute authority of knowledge. And in this way, this knowledge is like our mother, and it's telling us who our father is. So in the Bhagavad Gita, it describes such knowledge. Chapter 9, verse 2. This knowledge is the king of education, the most secret of all secrets. It's the purest knowledge, and because it gives direct perception of the self by realization, it is the perfection of religion. It is everlasting, and it is joyfully performed. So this knowledge is confidential. It's not that it's not like it's widely known, and it's pure, unaffected by the defects of our imperfect senses, and it's not given by anyone. The knowledge is being passed by people, by personalities who are fully self-realized, and are not, by their practice of this knowledge, then they've done the experiment, and the result is there, that they can see things as they are. They're not trust. They don't. It's like the saying goes, seeing is believing, but not according to these great sages and saints. Because, for example, we can't see our own hand if it's dark. Even if it's right in front of us, we're dependent on light and so on. I was listening to a nice voice. So we've the examples are there with the 6 Goswamis, the very renounced self-realized souls. They could just live on a little bit of butter and sleep 2 hours a night. Prabhupada, he would go through all sorts of austerities and inconveniences to spread this Krishna consciousness movement, to translate his books, and sleeping only a few hours also to that regard, and to facilitate that. And Jack Barrett, we see how he was totally absorbed in his spiritual identity in relationship with the Lord, that so much so that he wasn't affected by insults and offences. Ignorant people were hurling towards him. So we can't imitate that, but we can follow in their footsteps. And Prabhupada gave the example of, like, we've got to take care of the body. He had a heart attack, and the devotees were trying to get a doctor to see to him. And it wasn't the days of the internet and so on, so they had to go searching and found a Jewish doctor, and who diagnosed that he just had a heart attack. And he asked him if he was doing any exercise, and he said, Prabhupada said no. And he said, you should do some exercise, walking. And from then, Prabhupada had his morning walks every day. There's one time he was in an airplane, and the turbulence was so great, they're dropping so many feet up and down, and people were going nuts, going crazy. But he's just sitting there with his hand in his beak, like, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, undisturbed. And even afterwards, he wasn't kind of saying, wow, that was an amazing experience or anything like that. He was just focusing on what his mission was for that day. It's the same when he was in a car crash, and this car veered into them, and there was a head-on collision. And he was sitting like that on his cane, and his legs crossed in the back. And he didn't say a word after it. Everything's clear. They managed to get him to his next destination, and they actually found that he had a gash on his knee. But when he arrived at the airport and so on, it was just like, so who's picking us up and where are we going? No mention of it at all. So we can't kind of be artificially so renounced, because as devotees in those times, they were told they had to have cold showers, and some couldn't. It was too much for some, so they left. And so we've learned from that we don't force it, announce you've got to do this, and you've got to do that. You know, we accept that people coming from different backgrounds and so on, and not necessarily so austere, especially in this day and age. Caution is there to see the needs and different needs of people, and choose to our own needs also. Because if we don't, then the mind can be very, very strong. And if we artificially try and come to the platform of renunciation, like sleeping just a few hours a night, if any, or just eating very, very little, then we could even go crazy. So, so that's something that we need to consider daily. And when these needs aren't met, then we can feel frustrated, angry, upset. All these emotions can be there. So there's a way of dealing with them in such a way that we can actually make spiritual advancement, and that devotional service can be joyfully performed. Because we may be something may be coming at us, maybe affecting us in different ways that cause some upset. But then, for the process of self-realization, we're meant to be conscious of what's happening, what this emotion is there, that emotion is there, what does it mean? Because all these things are packed with information. Krishna created them for a reason, so that we can address our needs. So it's so important to not so much react in a way that thinking that, oh, this person has made me feel like this. No, it's a situation that's caused something within our hearts to rise up. So this is due to impurities within our own heart. These are due to impurities of our own heart, so we're put in situations that will help us recognize these impurities so that we can see them for what they are and put them aside. It's like the process of self-realization is like the process of making ghee. When we boil butter, it slowly becomes clear, but then there's these impurities that rise to the surface, and the process is that you skim up these impurities, pass them aside. Being ghee, it can be even used for another purpose, but just for the sake of this example, it's an impurity that can be just thrown away. And so similarly, when things arise in our minds and our hearts that make us feel sad, frustrated, angry, depressed, and so on, it's in a way, it's Krishna trying to tell us something. There's something not being addressed here, and so we can, instead of reacting, we can pause and take a look at it. And is it because I'm tired? Is it because the person spoke to me in such a way that I'm not comfortable with, or things like that? So rather than reacting, we can take that pause. It may mean distancing ourselves for a while, going on, having our own space, let things settle down a bit, so we can see from more clarity, and see what our needs are that aren't being addressed. And in this way, we have a responsibility to ourselves to be able to go forward with clarity. Let's see. And so these emotions, they're revealing our needs. And then, if necessary, we can ask for help or some support to address these needs. And therefore can make requests. So something happens, we can observe, and then address. And so we can observe what we're experiencing, the emotions out there, those feelings. To name it, not repress it, express it, not repress it, and to see those needs are, and if we need help to address those needs, and to go forward and do so. And in this way, we're being responsible. We're also showing self-respect. We're showing love to ourselves, because if we're not able to love ourselves, then or be compassionate upon ourselves, then how can we know how to be compassionate with others? And we have this one major, very important stanza spoken by Lord Chaitanya, Chalala Pisa Vichila, Tora Pisa Vishana, Malina, Malina, Dina, Kirtanya, Sadi. So one should chant the holy name in a humble state of mind, thinking oneself lower than the straw in the street. One should be more tolerant than a tree, devoid of all sense of false prestige, and should be ready to offer all respects to others. In such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So, again, we find if we show that respect for ourselves, then we're not looking for it for that same respect from others. We're not seeing it as a need, because we're showing it to ourselves, so we can remain calm and equipoised and ready to assist others. So once we're compassionate upon ourselves, then we're equipping ourselves to better equip others. And in this way, devotional service can be joyfully performed, because when we every day, because it's all about relationships, we interact with so many every day, and so it's all practice for us to come to that stage where we can, no matter what's happening, we can be in have mental equilibrium, be equipoised. Any questions or comments?
I really like those practical points that you gave about how we can address those situations. So yeah, thank you for that. But I really like the point that you made about how people, just because they think there's no God, think that's true just because, they think, oh, just because I haven't seen God, that means that He doesn't exist. And how we have to accept some sort of authority. I think those people, they would believe everything that they hear on TV or the news, and yet they don't want to accept, hear from authority that have realized spiritual vision, and they don't want to accept that just because it contradicts their beliefs.
Yeah, and also Prabhupada used to say this, because if they don't want to accept truth, then it means they want to be cheated by untruth, because it suits their sense gratification or their take on life. That's one of enjoyment, and puts them in the center. And it's just basically due to fear or pride, arrogance, or whatever, that there is another realm of existence, that they've been cheated out of being the eternal, full of bliss and full of knowledge being, but they're looking to material sources which will always fail them. So that's why the devotee has to be equipoised so that they can know how to inject this knowledge in such a way that others can accept according to time, place and circumstance. Yes. Yeah, so Krishna created us so we are of value. It's not that we should have a low self-esteem and so on, and think it's artificially humble to think anything. But Krishna has created us so we are of value. So if we value ourselves, then Krishna's created everybody else, so they're of value also. So naturally, respect. With that kind of attitude, respect is naturally there. And so anyone's opinion of us, they may call us this, that and the other, but we know that we're not that if we're fixed in that conception that we are the spiritual being. Part and parcel Krishna loves me, and I love him, and I'm going to do whatever I can to please him. But if you're saying this about me, then I'm sorry about that. If I can, is there something I can address it with a question? Why do you say that? Sorry if I've offended you, but is there anything I can do for you like that? If we come from a position of respect and value and love, then people experience that and it disarms them. I was in a pub once and this lady was just having a real go at me. I didn't know what to do, I was just standing there. And then I don't know what came over, how it happened, but I just thought to give her a hug. And she just melted, she just started crying, and no one's ever done that for me, my husband, I don't know, and all this kind of thing. So her anger was an expression of her hurt, so, and many times we've had on the street, any book distributors that tell you how they've had so many insults or sometimes physical abuse even, I had one person who said, if you approach me again, I'll just take you down the back alley. And he looked really mean as well. But somehow, I was so caught up in Sankirtan, I approached him again. And he wasn't very pleased. But after some time, he came back and he said, he came to me one day and said, I shouldn't really have treated you like that. It was totally off the wall. Here's some money. I don't believe on what you're doing, but I'll just to say I'm sorry, I'll give you some money. And it's like this. So so in this way the devotee can be friendly with the saints and the ruffians, the thieves and criminals as well. There's so many people in prisons that have friendship with devotees who've reached out to them. And there's one person who was on death row even due to the electric chair. And he was given Bhagavad Gita and corresponded to devotees. And when it came to his turn, the guards couldn't believe it, because usually when the prisoners are going on their way to get executed, they're struggling like anything. They're fighting with the guards. They may need two or three to keep them, to control them. But this person, he was just having jokes with the guards and just walked without any concerned because he knew that he wasn't going to really die. He knew he's convinced that he was a spiritual being. So in this way, we can work towards being like self-realized souls like Prabhupada and the 6 Goswamis. It's just a matter of time, and it's so nice, this process. It can be like an adventure. Sometimes it can be quite painful, but it's just a painful lesson. So, any other comments or questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
How can we distinguish if a situation that's happening is some like trap of our mind, or if it's really happening, like giving us signals that we have to change something or learn something from this? Because we are so conditioned to follow our minds, right? That sometimes we don't know what's...
Yeah. Well, we have a saying that this goes on. If we think we can advance in spiritual life without association with devotees, we're living in a hallucination. And so it's always important to connect with somebody that one can trust, to be able to express oneself and put it in the open so it can be seen with more clarity. One can look up, like sometimes I look up different subject matters and in our websites and see what's been spoken about that particularly. There's seminars on different aspects of makeup and spiritual life. How, because these things can get in the way. Without knowing the situation, you can't really say very much. But it's always best not to go alone. Not to reach out to somebody or to be able to get some prayer. Prayers are very powerful, and that can become answered in different ways. You can maybe just open a book and the first line you read, like that, or switch on a lecture or something similar. Or if it's anything specific, I can maybe send some seminar on that subject. But you have to try and see it from subjectively but objectively as well, because we can get caught up in thinking I'm this and I'm that and this is mine. Just a limited perspective on things. Is that okay?
So it's just in relationship with this question. Also, we all have a physical body, and if you have like a finger cut, then the association of devotees can help you to fix that finger. But if you break leg, that may not be sufficient. Just to be in association of devotees to fix your leg, you may need to go to the doctor. So the mind is also kind of subtle energies. It's some mechanical instrument, and actually, to very strong Krishna consciousness and chanting is possible to overcome many problems on a mental level. But we may not be on that platform that we are applying ourselves like 100%, and we may need as well some help outside of association of devotees with our mind. So just to add that perspective, that not every problem, especially physical, and even the mind problem, not necessarily can be resolved potentially it can, but there are some mental issues that goes just beyond, certain mechanics of thinking can become too complicated that we are not able to resolve it just by Krishna consciousness, and we need some help.
Yeah, but that can be the initial thing, like I was saying now. But if we can't address it ourselves, or we're not expert in that field, then we can give direction. To somebody who is, so whether it's physical or mental or psychological or in a particular area.
And another question. You were saying about, how when somebody says something to us, we shouldn't lose our self-value and kind of answer with a question and that kind of thing. So I understand that principle, but there may be something that we need to work on because we are not, manifested the qualities of the soul. We are not fully purified, and maybe somebody is giving us some very kind feedback that we need to something that we need to work on. So if we kind of dismiss that, we may lose opportunity for, some advancement or kind of live in a denial of something that we need to work on. Because as you mentioned about purification is taking place, so certain things may actually foreign to us, like a mind, on a mind level, can manifest that is something that is foreign to the soul. At the same time, it needs to be purified in order to go forward. So just wanted if you could clarify that.
As if I understand you correctly, we need to be purified to go forward. So that may mean receiving some feedback.
Yeah, because you mentioned if somebody says something to us, we shouldn't lose the value of ourselves, which we shouldn't, because the soul has the full value of Krishna. But at the same time, you said, like answering with a question, and kind of, it sounded a bit like a brushing aside, the thing that other person would say to you. So I guess, in some circumstances that may be helpful, but I guess maybe not in all circumstances.
Maybe not, but I was speaking from when someone kind of insults us, or that's what I'm saying, from that perspective I'm speaking. But if someone's giving feedback, then we can appreciate that and can deliberate on and digest it. Because we've got to understand it ourselves and see, because it could, appreciate it, show some appreciation for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, what's that there? Grantharaj Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai.
Jai.
Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.
Jai.
Srila Guruvrind Ki Jai.
Jai.
Vrinda Premanandi.
Haribol.
Samavita Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai.
Jai. Grace Vrinda Mataji Ki Jai.